Nolan, it would seem like his next film, The Odyssey, would be a big slam dunk, but it has become the most controversial movie of the year.
Christopher Nolan has spent his entire career being the one director in Hollywood who stays above the noise. No social media, no culture war entrenchment, no ideology-first casting announcements. He makes the film speaks, audiences show up. That has been the Nolan formula for 2 decades, and it has worked without exception. So when his next project, a $250 million adaptation of one of the most foundational texts in Western civilization, becomes the subject of an open letter from an entire country, a ratioed trailer in multiple nations, and a backlash that the mainstream entertainment press is desperately trying to frame as a fan problem rather than a creative decision problem, something genuinely different is happening. This is not the Nolan story anyone expected to be telling. But here we are, and we are going to go through every documented piece of this, the casting, the interviews, the audience data, the Greek open letter, the Access Media spin, and by the end of it, you will have the full picture. Let's get into it. Who Nolan is and why this is surprising. To understand why the Odyssey controversy lands differently than, say, a Marvel casting controversy or a streaming reboot nobody asked for, you have to understand what Christopher Nolan actually represents in the current Hollywood landscape. He does not own a cell phone, though all of his assistants do. He works exclusively through major studio infrastructure while maintaining genuine creative independence. He is, by any honest measure, the last filmmaker working at the blockbuster level whose name alone consistently moves tickets. Not franchise recognition. Not IP recognition. His name. Nolan, James Cameron, the only comparable argument, has made 3 films in 17 years, 2 of which are from the same franchise. And as has been noted more than once, audiences tend to forget those films exist somewhere around the time they reach the parking lot. Nolan's films Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Oppenheimer stay in the cultural conversation. The other thing that defines Nolan's filmography is his commitment to grounding his material in something tangible. Even when he takes on science fiction or superhero properties, there is a framework of internal logic that anchors everything. He made 3 Batman films by insisting they take place in a recognizable world. He made Interstellar by consulting theoretical physicists. He is the filmmaker who required audiences to effectively read supporting literature to fully parse the ending of Interstellar, and we are still, as of now, waiting on whatever supplementary material would explain Tenet to the general public, including, reportedly, Robert Pattinson, who was actually in that film. So when this specific director, takes on Homer's Odyssey, a mythological epic that exists entirely in the realm of gods, monsters, and divine intervention, the first reaction from a lot of people was genuine curiosity about how he would approach the material. Ridley Scott pulled off Legend, a full fantasy film with total conviction. 2 versions of it, both with legitimate cases for being masterpieces. So it is not impossible. But Nolan doing mythology was always going to be a story. What nobody anticipated was that the story would end up being about something else entirely. It started with the casting of Lupita Nyong'o. Nyong'o, Kenyan-born, Mexican-raised, Yale MPhA graduate was announced as playing Helen of Troy. Not just Helen of Troy, but also her twin sister Clymestra. 2 roles, both central to the source material, both canonically Greek. The immediate question from audiences was straightforward. Why? Not why cast Nyong'o as an actor she is credentialed and capable, but why cast a Kenyan-Mexican actress in the role of the most iconic Greek woman in literary history, in a film that was actually shot in Greece, without a single Greek actor in a principal role in the entire production? That question generated what has been described as a level of backlash toward a Christopher Nolan project unlike anything seen before, including in the trailer metrics. The Odyssey trailer became the most disliked Nolan trailer ever released. It was nearly ratioed in the United Kingdom. It was ratioed in Australia. It was overwhelmingly ratioed in Germany. Universal released additional promotional clips alongside the main trailer, and the only one approaching ratio territory was the clip featuring Nyong'o specifically. This is not fringe behavior. These are broad, multinational audience responses from territories that do not share the same political discourse as American social media. Let's look at the full cast as it has been announced, because the picture it presents is what prompted the response that escalated this from a fan discussion to a diplomatic adjacent situation. Zendaya, African American, German, and Scottish ancestry, cast as the goddess Athena. Lupita Nyong'o, Kenyan, Mexican cast as Helen of Troy and Climestra. Charlize Theron, South African, John Leguizamo, Colombian. Benny Safdie, Syrian Jewish, Yedda Adepo, Nigerian, Mia Goth, Brazilian, Elliot Page, Canadian, Travis Scott, Matt Damon, no Greeks, in a Greek epic, shot in Greece. This is what prompted Greece as a nation, through cultural representatives, to write an open letter directly to Christopher Nolan and Universal Studios. The letter's central statement is this: "We did not vanish. We are still here." Greek identity has persisted continuously for more than 3,000 years through transformation, not disappearance. The open letter makes clear this is not raised because Greek identity is considered fragile. It is raised because it is continuous and documented. And then, and this is the part that cuts deepest, the letter invokes Hollywood's own stated rules. It points directly at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences' own guidelines and requirements around minority representation, authenticity, and diversity, and asks a simple question: where are the Greeks in this Greek story? Greece now knows what a significant portion of the global audience already understood. Hollywood's stated commitment to authentic cultural representation is selective in its application. The Nyong'o interview. The Elle magazine interview with Lupita Nyong'o is the point where the controversy found its clearest articulation of the creative philosophy underpinning these decisions. The interview states directly that her Helen of Troy is representative of the world. The framing is explicit. This casting is a deliberate representational choice, not an artistic one based on fit. When asked what it means to portray the face that launched 1,000 ships, Nyong'o rejected the premise. She cannot perform beauty, she said. She wanted to know who the character is beyond her appearance. Then came the line that generated significant discussion. She admitted within this interview that she had never heard of the Odyssey until she was offered the role. She holds a Master of Fine Arts degree from Yale University. She encountered Homer for the first time when her agent called her about this job. The Elle magazine interview also contains this exchange about her preparation. She stated that the research could be endless, but that with Christopher Nolan, it starts with the pages she was given. She based her performance on the script, not on the source material, not on 3,000 years of scholarship, interpretation, and cultural significance. The script. The magazine framed the public response as racist critique of a casting decision, while Nyong'o offered a counterpoint. This is a mythological story, she reminded readers. By that logic, presumably Chris Pratt could be cast as Anansi, the African trickster god, and that hypothetical would presumably generate zero objection from the same quarters currently defending the Odyssey casting. Presumably, Zendaya and the feminist translation. Zendaya's casting as Athena has received comparatively less coverage, but there is a detail attached to it that has not been discussed enough. Zendaya posted a photograph of herself holding 2 books she was using to prepare for the role. The first was Frank Herbert's Dune, which is not directly relevant to anything here. The second was Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey. Emily Wilson's translation is a specific text with a specific ideological framework. Wilson herself has described the silencing of female voices and the dangers of female agency as central problems in the poem. That is her translation's stated interpretive lens the Odyssey read and rendered through that framework. That is the research material the actress playing Athena chose to share publicly. That tells you something about the version of this story that is being told. John Leguizamo, Elliot Page, A&D the activist casting pattern. The casting of John Leguizamo is worth addressing directly because his presence in the film is not a decision based primarily on his acting history. Leguizamo is primarily known at this point in his career for his political activism and his TDs, his public. Visible opposition to a specific political figure rather than for any recent acting work of comparable profile to a $250 million Christopher Nolan production. Elliot Page's casting in a role that has not yet been officially confirmed or described in any detail follows a similar logic. Page's presence is an act of statement. Whatever the role turns out to be, it is not there because of the specific performance history that would qualify an actor for a Christopher Nolan epic. Travis Scott is also in this film. When you look at the aggregate of these choices, Nyong'o, Zendaya, Leguizamo, Page, Scott alongside the complete absence of Greek representation in a Greek story. The conclusion that emerges is not that these are casting decisions made from creative inspiration, they are casting decisions made from activist intent. That is a distinction worth making plainly, because the film's defenders in the press have worked hard to conflate the two. The actual act of creative defiance, the truly subversive choice, would have been casting this film with authentic representation and adapting Homer with fidelity. That would have been genuinely unexpected from contemporary Hollywood. Instead, the film is following a by now familiar ideological template, just with a significantly larger budget and a significantly more respected director attached. Right on schedule, the entertainment media ecosystem has mobilized to run defense. Collider, owned by Canadian company Valnet, which also operates Screen Rant, Gamer Rant, and CBAR published a piece by writer Connor Sheeran titled, "The insane reactions to Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey are part of a bigger problem Hollywood can't ignore." The article characterizes The Odyssey as already a victim of the negative economy. This is a meaningful inversion. The Odyssey is not a victim of the negative economy. It is a contributor to the negative economy, because the decisions that generated the backlash were made by the production. The audience is responding to choices. They did not create the choices. The Collider piece goes on to invoke Star Wars fandom as the template for unreasonable audience behavior, a reliable move in access media deflection. The framing is that Star Wars fans became less interested in story quality and more interested in the culture war surrounding franchise ownership. What Collider either cannot or will not acknowledge is that what audiences are demonstrating is pattern recognition. The pattern is consistent, ideologically motivated casting and adaptation choices produce predictable audience rejection. And the entertainment press response is always to blame the audience for recognizing the pattern. Newsweek ran a piece framing the situation as the Odyssey being swept up in culture wars, as though it arrived in this controversy from outside rather than generating it from within. Vanity Fair published a piece asking why Elon Musk should be commenting on Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey at all. Coming Soon ran a piece arguing the casting backlash does not hold up under scrutiny. This position requires dismissing the straightforward observation that Helen of Troy was not from Kenya, that Athena is not African American, and that the character of Eumaeus the swineherd was not Colombian, given that Homer was writing several centuries before anyone in the Mediterranean world had knowledge that the Americas existed. Here is the argument that the film's defenders will make, and it deserves to be engaged with seriously rather than dismissed. Christopher Nolan is not just any director. He is the director who made the argument for cinema itself during the pandemic, who insisted on theatrical releases when the entire industry was collapsing into streaming. He is the filmmaker who has consistently made the case that mass audiences want something they do not yet know they want. He is one of the few people in contemporary Hollywood who has earned genuine creative autonomy. He has also said nothing publicly that crosses into the territory of his collaborators' statements. When asked about the audience wanting something new, he framed it as genuine creative ambition rather than ideological positioning. He has not so far said anything that reads as contempt for the audience. And when Tenet, arguably his weakest film, a movie that genuinely confused its own cast, was released into the worst possible theatrical environment, with half of the world's cinemas either closed or operating at reduced capacity. And with a significant portion of the global audience actively afraid to enter enclosed public spaces, it still generated $365 million worldwide. When Odyssey tickets went on sale for the 70ms Minis and premium large format screenings, audiences were waiting in queues of over an hour for specific showings. That is Nolan's real-world audience behavior in 2025 and 2026. The genuine questions, then, are two. Not will this film be a catastrophic commercial failure, it will not be. It is a $250 million Christopher Nolan epic on a foundational literary text. It will make money. The question is whether it underperforms relative to what a Nolan adaptation of the Odyssey, cast authentically and adapted faithfully, would have generated. And the second question is simply whether the film is good. Let's state the documented facts plainly. The Odyssey features no Greek actors in principal roles despite being shot in Greece and adapting the foundational text of Greek civilization. Greece wrote a formal open letter to Christopher Nolan and Universal Studios, invoking Hollywood's own stated diversity requirements and noting their continuous 3,000-year cultural presence. The trailer is the most disliked Christopher Nolan trailer ever released and has been ratioed in Australia and overwhelmingly ratioed in Germany. The actress playing Helen of Troy stated in a major magazine interview that she had never heard of the Odyssey before receiving the role. The actress playing Athena is publicly preparing with a feminist, ideological translation of the source text. The film's casting includes performers who are most visible in public life for activism rather than acting. The entertainment press is uniformly framing audience concern as the problem to be managed rather than the casting decisions as the choices to be examined. Christopher Nolan, to his credit, has not said anything contemptuous about his audience. He has said nothing you could read as dismissal. He is the only person connected to this project who has earned the benefit of the doubt. And he still has it for now. But he has been around long enough to know what these casting decisions produce as a cultural response. He has worked in Hollywood long enough to understand the pattern, which means, at minimum, these choices were made with full awareness of what they would generate. Whether they were made from genuine creative conviction, or from institutional pressure, or from a new ideological alignment, that answer will arrive with the film itself. What is certain right now is this: The Odyssey is going to be the pop culture flashpoint of the year. History enthusiasts versus Nolan loyalists, cultural authenticity advocates versus progressive casting defenders. Critics who will be under enormous pressure to grade the ideology rather than the film. It might genuinely be more entertaining as a cultural event than it turns out to be as a movie. But it will not flop. Nolan does not flop. The real question, the one that will take until the reviews land and the numbers come in to answer, is what it could have been. Subscribe. This story has a long way left to run.